All right, it's Thursday night, time for our Las Vegas Triathlon Club member spotlight. This is going to be a lot of fun. This is a guy I love to run into. He's always super friendly. He is so well knowledgeable about what's going on in the endurance world in our local community, and really a great advocate for endurance athletes in general, and really cycling is such a leader in the community. And we're going to hear more about that tonight. So we've got Tony Capsuto. Hey, Tony, how's it going?
It's I'm going. I'm doing great. I thank you guys for inviting me to share tonight.
Well, we had your better half on already. So, Eden, and this is a powerhouse family of endurance athletes too. And we're going to hear more about Tony's story. But so we'll compare your answers with what she had too.
And as
But
John said before, this is about you. This isn't
that's right.
about Eden tonight.
Yep, this is about Tony and getting involved in triathlon and endurance sports. So this is going to be a lot of fun. I know I'm going to learn something tonight. So this will be great. But I'm going to turn it over to Bob for the official introduction.
Well, thank you, John, and welcome again, Tony. It's really wonderful to have you on. And
Thank you, Bob.
for everybody listening, it's like I already learned a whole bunch about Tony that I didn't know before just by talking to him for the first 5 minutes. Tony's been with the club for about 10 years. He's an integral part of the club. And Tony, I just admire and respect him. He's a dedicated husband and father of 5 kids, and he's working as a contracting company, and he stays busy. He's correct me if I'm wrong. You're the chairman or the president of the Southern Nevada Bicycle Coalition.
No, I'm the vice president.
The vice president.
Yeah, I couldn't do what Keely Brooks does. She's utterly
But
amazing.
still, you're heavily involved in the Southern Nevada Bicycle Coalition, as well as this is something that I was interested in the fact that you also lead cycle rides from Lifetime. So we'll be talking about that later. And there's another thing I respect Tony for is like Tony is if you've ever seen him, he is quite muscular. I mean, he used to be a bodybuilder. We're going to talk about that, but I'm always curious about how a bodybuilder got started in triathlon, for one, and for two, how did that work? When you started swimming with all that muscle mass on you. So anyway, welcome. And really thank you so much for being here tonight, Tony. And tell us how'd you get started in triathlon?
Well, again, thanks for having me, you guys. And it would be hard for me not to include my wife, my lovely wife Eden, in my story, because she's really the reason how I got into endurance sports. As you mentioned, Bob, I used to be really into bodybuilding. I had a much bigger frame than I do today. And even today, I know some people still look at me and they're like, you're the wrong guy to be on a bike or swimming or running. And somehow, I managed to get it done. And, there's some names that you guys might know. Some of the older members might know, like Doug Silk, who goes by Tri Silk. And 10 years ago, I met Doug and he got involved with our nonprofit, and one day it was like, hey, let's go for a bike ride, and I didn't know what that looked like at the time, and I was a bit bigger, and I got on the bike, rode 15 miles, and I was so proud of myself that I made it all 15 miles. I couldn't stop patting myself on the back. Little did I know that was just a drop in the bucket and just a small taste of what was to come. And, as I started surrounding myself more and more with people in the endurance community, the bug bit me. And, it didn't take long after that. I bought my first Cannondale slice. And, early in my triathlon days, it was more of duathlon days because, I was absolutely terrified of water. So when the Tri Club would do their local events, I would always sign up for the duathlons. I wasn't quite there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And me and water was like water and oil. We just didn't mix. And
well, that has changed, so that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And it took a little bit of some humiliating or humble experiences to get to the point where I was teachable in the water. Great people like Nancy Jones spent time with me, trying to, teach me how to reach and pull and giving me drills to do. And, I could make it 25 yards in the water. And after that, I was absolutely out of breath, gassed, and terrified. And I remember Nancy, just kind of going, maybe Chris Kemp can help you. And so I went and talked to Chris Kemp, and we went to the pool, and I remember him looking at me and saying, "All right, give me your best 200." And I jumped in the water and I swam to the other side, and one more time, there I am, gassed. I couldn't swim another foot.
Yeah.
And I remember how he looked at me, and he was just confused, right? It was the look of confusion. And he's like, "Well, come on back over here, So I kind of dog paddled back across the water, made my way over there, and he just looked at me. He's like, "Okay, let's try this one more time." And by the end of our hour, he looked at me and gave me my money back and said, "I'm sorry, I can't help you."
Yeah,
And
this
it
is
was,
just there.
you got to learn to be comfortable in the water before I can even teach you anything, And again, that was a pretty humbling experience.
Yeah.
And I
But
really
this,
didn't know where to go from there until I ran into Dax, Coach Dax. And, for anybody who's had some challenges, in the water, I almost drowned when I was 4 years old. And, that might have had something to do with it. But I got connected with Coach Dax. And one day he just gave me just an incredible amount of his time and his attention. And we went out to the lake. And I remember how it happens to this day. And it started just swimming right alongside the shore, in 4 or 5 feet of water, just back and forth, back and forth. And every time we turned around, we'd go out a little bit further. And that feeling of fear and chaos would just, it just melted away.
Mm.
So I call Dax the swim whisperer, because
Yeah.
he's the guy that got me comfortable in the water. And ever since then, 70.3 is my jam, baby.
We got to unpack this. There's a whole lot that you just touched on that I'm really glad you brought this kind of stuff up, because it's really good for new folks to hear the fact that you, as good as you are and as good of a triathlete as you are, you started off going 25 yards, stopping out of breath, and I mean, it's good to hear, for other people to hear this, because just about everybody goes through this if they didn't really start when they're 6 years old swimming,
Right.
and it's okay. And you'll get there,
Right.
And the other thing that I really like what you said was you hit a point where you were comfortable in the water, you weren't struggling anymore. And it's like, right. And that's whenever that's when he was like, "Hey, I can swim and not struggle to survive. You can swim, not just try to stay alive." So
Right.
yeah, this is,
so you nailed it. You hit the hammer right on the head. So if you don't grow up, swimming freestyle or learning how to breathe, and it's just an abnormal process, right?
Very
Breathing in the
abnormal.
water is not normal.
no,
And if you don't spend a lot of time doing it, then as you get older, it elevates the heart rate. It does things that your body's telling you this isn't okay.
you're in a foreign world.
So getting through that fear, because that's really what it is, and then just bringing your body back into like a Zen state, as Dax calls it, right? And then from there, it's just growing, right? Once you're comfortable in the water, then you can learn to work on your stroke. You can learn to, focus your stroke around your breathing, your catch, your pull, everything else that, Coach Devaney would yell at you about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Get off the wall,
Well, hey, I love this, and Bob, you're spot on. I mean, this is so great for people to hear. And what I think is really important is it's humbling for you, and you use that word because you are already so fit that now you're taking on a sport that was a bit of a challenge. So that's neat that you stuck with it. But I'm curious, going back to why did you either even get in the pool, and why were you even training for a had you already signed up for a triathlon at that point?
So what happened, guys, was I was really into bodybuilding and physique competing and all that. And I had a few accidents toward the end of that part of my life, that hobby, that career, whatever you want to call it. And at one point I had to have my shoulder reconstructed, and you know, the whole lifting thing was not an option anymore. And so I had to find a new why. And as I mentioned previously, it was at that point that my wife and I had started the nonprofit and this new running thing. And I really enjoyed listening to Ron last night, because another great story, not to jump around, but man, when I first started running, he called it the Caveman Run. It was just slow and just abusive to my legs. And you guys sent me, you're like, go see Ron, he'll teach you how to run. And sure enough, every time I'd run, I'd get shin splints, I'd be in so much pain. And just in a few visits with Ron, man, it just like listening to him last night, I learned so much. There was so much to absorb and so much good stuff in there. And little did I know, he was recording me the whole time I was in his shop. And so when we went to go sit down, he's like, well, let's look at your posture.
Oh,
We start looking at all these different things, and it's all these little things that just change. And I wouldn't say it was overnight, but it was pretty quick that I went from being this disastrous runner to a pretty okay,
yeah.
Man,
athlete, and that's it.
Tony, I wish we would have had you on like 2 years ago, because the things that you're saying are so poignant, so important for new triathletes. It's like a lot of people think that running is natural, and that it's not a technical sport. It is.
Yeah,
You have to do it right to be efficient, and you learned that. And really huge ups to you. You learned how to swim, and you became comfortable in the water.
but
You learned how to
what, you
run and
guys,
quit beating your knees up.
I couldn't do any of that without the community, right?
Hmm.
So I have a really hard time taking any credit for any of this.
You're too humble there, guy.
We have a lot of great people that we're surrounded by in this community. They're always willing to stick their hand out and help and offer their help. Granted, everybody's got opinions, but there are a lot of people here that know what they're talking about, and have really helped me along the way. When it came to my bike, my buddy Matt Weig, you guys, I'm sure a lot of people know who he is. Really gave me some good insight how to just tweak some little things on my bike and just make myself more efficient. I could sit here all night and rattle off names to you guys we all know, who are just more than happy to share their experience and their insight to help us all become better athletes in the endurance world.
No, this is great. And Tony, this is where you're so embedded in the endurance community. This is great. But I want to get back to your story, and I want to hear more about you and even your first triathlon. Okay, I love this, that you needed to find a new why. You had an injury. You said, okay, time to do something different. You and your wife were getting into triathlon. And what was your first race that you actually signed up for?
So my first race was a BBSC event. It was a sprint, because I was still a chicken in the water, and 750 at that point
Yeah,
seemed doable.
yeah.
And I honestly don't recall if it was the Las Vegas Tri or
Rage.
Rage. It was one of the two.
Yeah.
And the first time I didn't make the podium, the second BBSC event, I think I stepped on, up on the podium for third place or something like that. And I just remember how, I felt like I had accomplished something, relatively good. It felt good.
Yeah, that's
right?
great.
And then from there, it just started progressing, right? So more BBSC events, Cedric's awesome. They always put on a good event. We went to St. George. We did Cocopelli.
Mhm.
That was my first Olympic distance event.
Wow.
I ended up on the podium there. It was a great race. You know, there's so much camaraderie. I know this is about me, but you know, it's great when you have your group of people there like we did in Oregon recently. You know, it must have been 50, 60 of
Yeah.
us.
Right.
And it's, you know, there's just this great support system. So going out there, I remember a lot of my friends were a little concerned, you know, about the swim, Tony and his swim, right? You know, it certainly wasn't the best time in the water, but I made it through. You know, there was no panic. There was none of those things that we talked about. You know, my strategy's always pretty much been the same: survive the water, catch everybody on the bike, and then try and stay in front of them on the run, right? And you know, to this day, it's still pretty much like that. I'm working on changing that though. If I can dial in my run a little better, and listening to Ron last night, I picked up on a few things.
Yeah.
You always learn, right? You always keep learning.
Absolutely. You know, if there's one thing I can tell the new guy, you know, it's you don't have to be a good originator, just a good duplicator. And the other nugget is when you're green, you're growing. When you're ripe, you're rotten. You know.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. So I love this, you know, progression of races from sprint to Olympic and 70.3s now, and now you're doing 70.3s like there's nothing. But on that first race, you know, what's interesting is you had this sporting background where you were really good at, and now you're taking on a new sport that you're working into. So what was it like even doing that first race? And I know you know, you talked about the swim, but give us some sense of what that first race was like.
And also to add on to that, Tony, I was just wondering how much of that first panic, you know, came in and how you fought that off on the swim.
So, you know, so the first question, well, let's answer Bob's question first. So, to answer the first question, Bob, is I would go back to the things that Coach Dax had taught me,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? And how to get back to my Zen place, right? And it was all focused around breathing through the water, right? Your stroke is based on your breathing, not the other way around, right? I think I
And
have that right.
slowing down a little bit and getting that rhythm.
Right, exactly. And just full exhales, exhaling all the way when your face is in the water, turn your head, get a full breath of air, and then over exaggerating sometimes, you know, instead of just turning your head a little bit, you're a little bit faster, but if you need to exaggerate a little more and pull your head out a little more and go up a little air, that's another way to maybe calm down a little bit, right? And then, you know, that first race, I'm sorry, John, what was your question?
Yeah, no, I'm just curious. Okay, so you get out of the water and you get on the bike, and you've been doing biking at that point, right? And you
Yeah.
felt pretty good on the bike at that point, and
So I get out of the water. I remember, okay, so I got to tell you guys the story. It's freaking hilarious because it's freaking 5 o'clock in the morning. The sun's not out yet. It's cold. It's windy. Everybody's got their wetsuits on, you know, full wetsuits. And then there's Chris Fetter with his freaking Speedo getting ready to jump in the water. And that was the first time I actually met him that day. And I was just like to myself, I was like, who's that nut? Right? It was Fetter. Anyway, so I when I got out of the water, I felt pretty good coming out of the water. And, you know, the bike has always been, you know, my jam where I feel most comfortable on. And that course out there at St. George is a pretty fun course to ride. You know, you got that one little climb as you do that big U-turn out of the park, and the rest of it's pretty gravy. I just knew that, you know, based on the little bit of experience and training I had, you know, I use a power meter, you know, I use a computer, I have a pretty good idea based on what I've learned where I can be at and still be efficient on the run when I get off the bike. So I knew what I had to offer on the bike. And so that's kind of how it went for me on the bike. I got to the turnaround and, I still felt pretty fresh. Early on in my cycling days, I learned a lot about my body and how my body operates under different types of pressure.
Yeah.
And early on, I dubbed the nickname Captain Cramp because I would cramp all the time.
Yeah.
And I remember one time, out at Red Rock, doing the loop out there, both my quads locked up, and I'm literally on the side of the road, locked into my into my pedals on the side of the road, and people are riding by throwing salt pills at me.
Oh boy. Not
Yeah,
a fun time.
Learning about the mechanics of our body and how our bodies work under pressure and dialing in nutrition is certainly important. And when I first started, I didn't think it was that important.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I just like training, you just take a lot of muscle milk and go lift some heavy weights, and take a good pre-workout and you're good, at least when you're younger. But that's certainly not the case with endurance sports. There's a lot of planning and a lot of mental kind of mind games that are going on for some of us. I know for me, it's constant planning. And so making sure I took my nutrition early on the bike, it would help me to avoid any cramping on the run, especially if it was liquid. And that's pretty much how it went the rest of the way.
Well, Tony, you are just a wealth of wisdom especially for new folks. I hope we're going to have to record this and put it out there for like new triathletes. Required watching.
To the new guys,
Tony learned all those lessons. What's that?
I said to the new guys, I can tell you what not to do.
Yeah, we all can.
Now let's talk about you've started in sprints and Olympics, but now you really seem to enjoy the 70.3. You're saying that that's a neat distance for you. So when did you sign up for your first 70.3, and which one was it?
So the wife and I did our first 70.3 together. A family that tries together stays together. We did Washington last year. It was a lot of fun. We try to make little vacations out of it too, to relieve some stress in our family. As most people know, if you know the Capsutos, we always got a lot going on. And so when we make the time to do a 70.3 or any event for that matter, we try to make the most out of it, and so we were up there for a week. The weather was okay. Washington was beautiful. We stayed at a really beautiful place on a lake and so on and so forth. And then we were up there again with more friends from Vegas. So we had that whole camaraderie thing going, and it was a good day. The weather probably could have been a little better, but we're not complaining, right? We weren't complaining.
Yeah.
We'll take the wind over St. George weather any day.
Yeah, right.
Right? Yeah. After I saw what Justin did that day and the rest of those guys, I'm like, I'll never complain about weather again unless it's like that.
Right.
And even then, he didn't really complain that much. I think he complained about climbing up that really steep hill, right? And I'm just
right.
That guy's a freaking animal.
Oh, I love it. So the 70.3 is the distance that you like to target now?
Yeah. So we recently did Oregon. I've got we've got a couple on the map. I'd like to get Florida done December 10th this year, and then Chattanooga is looking more and more like a reality for next year, which is the week after the Tour de France event here in Vegas.
The Chattanooga full or half?
No, the 70. I talked to Bob about this earlier. I'm going to do one full with my good friend Rick Dotto, who has done a couple of fulls, but him and I used to train a lot together early on in my early days of endurance sports. In fact, we did a lot of local events together, and we really pushed one another. And he's a bigger guy, bigger, muscular guy like I was. So there was a lot of good camaraderie there. And he's always bugging me to do a full with them. So
Yeah.
Ironman California. When I do it, not if, when I do it, I'm going to do it with my good friend Rick Dotto, and I'm going to do California with him.
That's great.
But for now, 70.3. 70.3 is easier on my body, and it's to me it's a lot of fun.
So thinking back over all the events you've done and where you are now, and thinking back on even how you started with trying to get the swim going, I mean, where would you say is or what would you say is your proudest moment that you've had?
And there's been a couple of really proud moments,
Mhm.
but I'll tell you, my proudest moment wasn't in any race and getting any medal. My proudest moment was that day that I swam with Dax, and we swam almost 3 miles nonstop.
Oh,
Wow.
And for a guy who spent most of his life terrified of water, and being able to swim that far that day
That makes sense.
without any fear,
yep.
without any of that stuff going on, was really, like, for me,
Mhm.
a great accomplishment.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was too.
And now if I look back at, race wise, well, I did this Oregon race. What a lot of people don't know was I was really sick when I did this race.
Mhm.
We showed up to Oregon 2 days before the race, and my chest was tightening up. I could feel something coming on. I started hammering down vitamin C's and zinc like crazy. And to be perfectly honest, if at 4 o'clock in the morning race day, my wife is pounding on me to get up and get ready, and I told her I didn't want to race that day. I didn't want to do it.
Wow.
And she looked at me and she's like, no, we came here to do this. Man up, get over there and take some Advil and some Dayquil and get your wetsuit on, because we're doing this, right?
Wow.
And so I did. I did what she did, and yeah, a little bit of spousal pressure, but I'm glad she pushed me. I'm glad she pushed me to do it. Halfway through the swim, I was definitely second guessing my life choices. But even then, coming out of the water, I still felt pretty bad. And once I got on the bike and I dried off, started feeling better, had a great bike. Right as I was coming back from, about a few miles from transition, I started to kind of feel a little crummy again. The congestion, the nasally, all that. And, grabbed my nutrition and headed out on the run, and felt pretty okay for the first 2-3 miles. There was a guy that I had passed on the bike. He'd caught me around mile 3 on the run, and we were just kind of chit-chatting a little bit as we were running. And I looked down, and my base salt, all my nutrition, it fell out of my belt. And it was at that moment, like, the drive in me was almost gone.
Yeah.
I was just pretty sad and pretty disappointed, and just I could feel the quads starting to get heavy. I could feel a lot of those things. I was already achy from being sick, and now I could just kind of feel it. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me a little bit too, but I knew I had to dial it back if I was going to finish that run. And I continually had to do that because there wasn't enough salt at any of the stations that was going to help Captain Cramp finish that run. So again, learning your body and learning how your body
Yeah.
works. Liquid nutrition is not always the answer for me.
Mhm.
Base products work really well for me, especially on the run, and they help me keep my pace. They help me with a lot of different things.
That's great.
Um,
Tony, what I love about these proudest moments is it's not about glory of finishing a podium or anything like that. It's about overcoming challenges,
That's right. It's about
and
what you overcame.
that's so
a-
neat.
Absolutely. And even though you guys, I PR'd that course,
Yeah,
I still wasn't happy because in my mind, when I got on that airplane to head out there, in my mind, that was going to be a 440 day,
yeah, yeah,
because it was a 440 course and all the numbers were pointing in
yeah.
that direction, and all the training and stuff
Hmm.
that we do, right? And but at the end of the day, I was grateful to cross the finish line
That's
in the
great because
condition I was in.
not only a physically tough person to overcome the challenges, but also mentally tough. And I can see why those are some proud moments. But I'm gonna switch gears because we're almost out of time because I know there's some other things that we're really proud about. One, we mentioned your lifetime cycling. I just need to tell you that the group that you work with is such a great group to jump in with. They're welcoming of new riders and very friendly, and that's great. And I think that that embodies who you are, and you've created that culture within that bike group. So thank you for really leading that bicycle sort of culture of being opening to bringing on new people and having fun riding hard too.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and anybody who's interested, we leave Lifetime Green Valley Friday mornings at 5:30. If you'd like to ride, there's different riding levels. We ride safe routes. Our primary concern is your safety.
Hmm.
And Sunday mornings we have ABC levels. It's a lot of fun. We'll go out 25, 35, 45-mile rides depending on what the course is for that particular day. And it's a whole lot of fun. It's very
Is that at
inclusive.
5:30 also?
No, that's at 6 o'clock. No, those times do change, and you don't have to be a member of Lifetime to ride with us.
Hmm.
All you do is show up, you sign a little digital waiver,
Hmm.
and you're going to meet some really great people.
Yep.
A lot of what I learned on the bike from people like Mindy Bennett, Mike Kennedy. I mean, again, there's some really knowledgeable people that are,
Hmm.
I have a lot of heroes. I have heroes all over the place,
Hmm.
and they don't all wear capes, that's for sure.
Well, that's great. And again, it's a great group, and a lot of times getting involved with a bike group, it gets a little intimidating, but your group is fantastic and welcoming and
Thank you.
super friendly. The other thing I want to go back and touch on is your work with the Southern Nevada Bicycling Coalition. That is so important. You are such great advocates for cycling, especially, and trying to get safe routes and safe ways for people to exercise. And you're doing all sorts of initiatives with 3 Feet for Pete and getting up billboards about trying to educate drivers. So thank you for your work in that area as well.
Yeah, really.
Thank, I appreciate that. The do part matters, right? The
Hmm.
doing part matters.
Yeah. No, I love it. And you folks are bringing a special bike race to town.
Mhm.
Yes, we've been involved with the Tour de France brand,
Okay.
and we're super excited about that. Uh, you know, we want to showcase
Yeah.
Vegas. We all ride here all the time, so for us, it's nothing crazy, right? You've ridden out at Red Rock a million times, or you've ridden up to Potosi. Uh, but a lot of people don't get experience what
Right.
we really have and sometimes take for granted. And so that's going to be showcased. And there's a lot of other really great things going on right now that I can't share with everybody
Yeah.
just yet. But let me tell you something, that Clark County, the state of Nevada, there's a lot of really
Yeah.
great things that are coming
Yeah.
for cycling and endurance sports in Southern Nevada that I think everybody just
Yeah.
is going to be real
Cool.
excited with, in the next year or two to come.
That's great. And again, it's the efforts like yours of really working towards that, improving the cycling community. So thank you. Tony, this has been great. I love hearing that you struggled with a 15-mile bike ride and now you just go out and you just hammer away for 50 miles. I follow you on Strava, and you're one of the elite riders, and it really is neat to hear that story. So thank you for
Yeah.
coming on and sharing this.
Well,
Yeah, Tony, this was great, especially, you're an integral part of the club and we really appreciate you being in it and what you do for, as John said, the community and everybody in our club as well. Thanks.
thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
All
I
right,
appreciate it.
have a good evening.
Thank you. You too.